In the late 1600s, a war broke out in the heart of New England that would leave lasting scars on both Native Americans and European settlers. This war, often overlooked in history, was one of the most devastating conflicts to take place on American soil. Known as King Philip's War, it was a brutal confrontation that shattered two worlds forever. By 1675, the relationship between Native Americans and settlers had deteriorated. What had begun as trading partnerships and fragile alliances quickly escalated into tensions as English settlers increasingly encroached on native lands. At the center of this rising conflict was Metacomet, known to the settlers as King Philip. His father, Massasoit, had maintained peaceful relations with early Plymouth settlers, but as time passed, Metacomet watched as his people's land and autonomy were stripped away. To him, resistance was the only way to protect the Wampanoag way of life. Tensions reached a breaking point when 3 Wampanoag men were executed by the English for the murder of John Sassamon, a Christianized native who had warned the colonists of Metacomet's revolt plans. For the Wampanoag, this execution was a declaration of war. Hostilities began with native warriors attacking isolated villages, burning homes, and killing settlers in a brutal series of raids. The settlers retaliated with equal ferocity, burning native villages and taking prisoners. It was a fight for survival on both sides. Over the next 2 years, the war spread, drawing in multiple tribes such as the Narragansett, Nipmuc, and Pecumtuck, each with their own grievances. Towns were devastated, thousands died, and starvation took hold as crops and food supplies were destroyed. One of the war's bloodiest encounters occurred during the Great Swamp Fight in December 1675, when the Colonial militia attacked a fortified Narragansett village in a brutal surprise assault. Hundreds of native men, women, and children were killed, but the native resistance only grew stronger. However, by 1676, the tide began to turn against Metacomet. The settlers' resources, numbers, and alliances with other native groups overwhelmed his forces. By August of that year, Metacomet was forced to flee into the swamps near his homeland. Despite his efforts, he was ultimately betrayed by a fellow Native American, and in a final confrontation he was killed. His death marked the end of King Philip's War, but the damage was already done. Thousands of settlers and Native Americans had died, native survivors were sold into slavery or fled, and the English colonies were left in ruins. For native peoples, the war marked the beginning of the end, as their societies were shattered and their autonomy stripped away, with English settlers cementing their control over New England. Though King Philip's War is often forgotten, it was a pivotal moment in American history, shaping the future of New England and the fraught relationships between Native Americans and European settlers. It was a war fought not just over land but for identity, freedom, and survival. Two worlds collided, and in the aftermath, neither would ever be the same again.